want to welcome everyone to the Senate Budget Committee today. Today we will again focus on the economy and additional steps that can be taken to strengthen the recovery and to create jobs. We are fortunate to have three distinguished witnesses here today. Dr. Alice Rivlin, of course, is well known to this committee and has testified here many times. She currently serves as Director of the Greater Washington Research at the Brookings Institution, as well as co-chair of the Bipartisan Policy Center's Debt Reduction Task Force. She was the founding director of the Congressional Budget Office, served as director of the Office of Management and Budget in the Clinton administration, and held the position of vice chair of the Federal Reserve. She's also served with me last year as a member of the President's Fiscal Commission. I can attest to the extraordinary contribution she made there. Dr. Rivlin is truly a giant in the budget world. We are delighted that she can be with us today. Dr. Harry Holzer is a professor of public policy at Georgetown University. Dr. Holzer served as the chief economist at the Labor Department during the Clinton administration. We're delighted that you could be here as well. And Dr. J.D. Foster is a senior fellow in economics of fiscal policy at the Heritage Foundation. Dr. Foster served as assistant director for economic policy at the Office of Management and Budget during the George W. Bush administration, and I understand he will be here shortly. Thank you all. We look forward to your testimony. I'd like to just begin by putting things in perspective, and I want to begin with a brief overview of the economic situation as I see it. It's important to remember what has happened to the economy. In January of 2009, the economy was losing more than 800,000 private sector jobs a month. Private sector jobs growth returned in March of 2010, and we've now had 18 consecutive months of growth. However, in August, we gained only 17,000 private sector jobs, which is clearly not enough. We face a very real threat of going back into recession. That's why I believe we need to take steps to generate near-term economic growth and jobs while we simultaneously address the long-term debt threat. The unemployment rate remains far too high. As of August, the unemployment rate was 9.1%. And long-term unemployment is up sharply. In August, long-term unemployment, those unemployed for 27 weeks or longer, was 3.9%. That's up dramatically from the 0.8% average over the period from 1948 to 2007. The median duration of unemployment is also up sharply, climbing to almost 22 weeks in August. We know that some of the drag holding back the recovery is caused by the nature of the recession that preceded it. Economists have found that following recessions that were caused by or accompanied by a severe financial crisis, the recoveries tend to be shallower and take much longer. Two leading economists, the two Reinhardts, Dr. Carmen Reinhardt, Dr. Vincent Reinhardt, found in their research, and I quote, "Real per capita GDP growth rates are significantly lower during the decade following severe financial crises. In the 10-year window following severe financial crises, unemployment rates are significantly higher than in the decade that preceded the crisis. The decade of relative prosperity prior to the fall was importantly fueled by an expansion of credit and rising leverage that spans about 10 years. It is followed by a lengthy period of retrenchment that most often only begins after the crisis and lasts almost as long as the credit surge. We also know the federal response to the recession and financial crisis helped to pull the economy back from the brink and made the recovery stronger than it would have been without it." One of our witnesses last week, Dr. Mark Zandi, along with Dr. Alan Blinder, a former vice chairman of the Federal Reserve, completed a study last year that measured the impact of federal actions to shore up the economy, including both the Fed's monetary policy actions and the fiscal actions taken by the Congress and the administration. Here is a quote from their report. "We find that its effects, it being the federal response, on real GDP, jobs, and inflation are huge and probably averted what could have been called Great Depression 2.0. When all is said and done, the financial and fiscal policies will have cost taxpayers a substantial sum, but not nearly as much as most had feared and not nearly as much as if policymakers had not acted at all. If the comprehensive policy responses saved the economy from another depression, as we estimate, they were well worth their cost. This chart, the next chart, shows Dr. Zandi and Dr. Blinder's estimate of the number of jobs we would have had without the federal response. It shows we would have 8 million fewer jobs in the second quarter of 2010 if we had not had the federal response. We see a similar picture in the unemployment rate. If we had not had the federal response, the unemployment rate would have been 15% in the second quarter of 2010 and would have continued rising to 16.2% in the fourth quarter of 2010. This again according to Zandi and Blinder. In addition to helping create jobs, it's also worth noting the importance of the 2009 Recovery Act in strengthening the nation's social safety net. According to an analysis of Census Bureau data, unemployment benefits kept 3.2 million people out of poverty in 2010. Medicaid and CHIP expansions ensured 500,000 fewer children were uninsured in 2010 than in 2007. SNAP, formerly known as food stamps, kept 3.9 million people out of poverty in 2010. And the Earned Income Tax Credit kept 5.4 million people out of poverty in 2010. I hope our witnesses can comment on the importance of these programs and their impact on the recovery.